everyone, and welcome back to Comics Panelist. Today we're taking a look at a new Kickstarter project called Civil Disobedience, Stories of Resistance, created by Tyler and Wendy Chin-Tanner through their publishing company, A Wave Blue World.
I'm Tyler Chin-Tanner, co-founder and co-publisher at A Wave Blue World.
I don't usually cover activist comics, but this Kickstarter made me ask a bigger question. So before we go any further, let's address the obvious elephant in the room. This is a political comic anthology. In fact, it's openly political. The creators aren't trying to hide that fact, and the Kickstarter campaign makes it very clear that this is a collection of stories centered around resistance movement, activism, civil rights, social change, and political engagement. But here's the question I want to explore today. And it's not whatever this comic is political, not whatever it's woke, and not wherever you personally agree with this message. The real question is, can political comics still attract readers in today's market? Because regardless of where you stand politically, this is actually a fascinating topic for comic book fans. For years now, we've heard arguments from every side of the political spectrum claiming that politics is ruining comics. At the same time, we've also seen creators and publishers argue that comics have always been political. And honestly, both sides have a point. If you look back through comic book history, politics has always been present. Captain America famously punched Hitler before the United States even entered World War II. The X-Men has often been interpreted through the lens of civil rights struggles. Green Arrow and Green Lantern tackled social issues back in the 70s. Even many underground comics were heavily political. So the idea that politics suddenly appeared in comics over the last decade simply isn't true. Politics has always been part of the medium. What's changed is that we live in a much more polarized environment. Everything feels political now. Movies are political, television is political, video games are political, sports are political, and of course, comics are political. The result is that the audience have become much more sensitive to political messaging than they have been in previous generation. In fact, when I first read about civil disobedience, it reminded me of the recent Oscar-winning film One Battle After Another. That movie also explored themes of resistance, activism, and individuals standing up against larger system of power. Whatever you loved the film or hated it, it sparked conversation, because it wasn't afraid to engage with political and social issues directly. And I think that's an interesting parallel here. Both One Battle After Another and Civil Disobedience seems to be asking a similar question. What does resistance look like in different times, different places, and different circumstances? That's where a project like Civil Disobedience becomes interesting. Because this anthology isn't trying to sneak a message into a superhero story. Its political perspective is in front and center. The creators are effectively saying, this is who we are, this is what we believe, these are the stories we want to tell.
It's a project that I'm editing alongside Vida Ayala and Jared Lujan.
Inside, you're going to find these really incredible stories that range from fantastical examinations of resistance to small autobiographical examinations of how we find hope in our own neighborhoods.
One of the things that was really important about this project was to encourage people to get out and get involved.
And wherever you agree with that perspective or not, there's something refreshing about that level of honesty. At least readers know exactly what they're getting. Now, let's talk about the business side, because this is where things get really interesting. You might be interested in doing comics because of propaganda. And by the way, stick around because we have some preview pages. You will have a better idea of what this anthology is about. But in the end, what matters, I think, is making money, not only propaganda. The comic book direct market has been shrinking for years. Publishers increasingly struggle to find audience for niche projects, and these projects feels very niche. Yet, crowdfunding has completely changed the equation. Kickstarters allow creators to reach readers directly. Instead of convincing a large publisher, a distributor, or a comic shop chain, creators only need to convince enough readers that the project is worth supporting. And that's a massive shift. In many ways, crowdfunding has become the ultimate test of audience demand. If enough people want a project, it succeeds. If they don't, it fails. Simple as that. And because of that, Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding platform has become a place where highly targeted projects can thrive. Not because they appeal to everyone, but because they appeal strongly to a specific audience. That's something I think many people miss when discussing political themed comics. The question isn't necessarily, does everyone want this? The question is, does a large enough audience want this? Those are two very different things. A project doesn't need universal appeal to be successful. It just needs a passionate audience. And that's exactly what crowdfunding is designed to measure. And at the moment of me filming this video, the campaign has raised $5,667 from the $25,000 they need. That's around 22% of the goal. They still have 22 days to go, but it doesn't look very good right now. But let's talk about the term that inevitably comes up in conversations like this: woke. Depending on who you ask, that word means completely different things. For some people, it means social awareness. For others, it means ideological activism. For others, still, it becomes a catch-all term for anything they perceive as political progressive. Personally, I think the term has become so broad that it often creates more confusion than clarity. Instead of asking whether civil disobedience is woke, I think a better question is this: can a comic with a strong political viewpoint still tell compelling stories? Because at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. Readers may disagree with the comic's politics and still enjoy the story. Likewise, readers may agree with the comic's politics and still find the story boring. Good storytelling and political messagings are not automatically the same thing. The strongest political comic throughout history succeed because they were first and foremost good comics. The politics enhanced the storytelling. They didn't replace it. And that's ultimately what this anthology will be judged on. Not simply by its message, but by the quality of the stories themselves. Can it entertain? Can it educate? Judging by the preview pages made available by The Beat for Henry, the anti-fascist honey badger, you can clearly see it's a manual for protesters. You have the honey badger clearly teaching you and giving you some tips if you participate in a protest on how you should behave and what to do in case things start to go wrong. But can it provoke thoughts? Can it offer perspective readers haven't considered yet before? Those are the questions that will determine its long-term impact. And that's another reason I brought up one battle after another. The film wasn't successful simply because it had political themes. It succeeded because audience connected with the characters, the storytelling, and the emotional stakes. The political elements became part of the experience rather than the entire experience. The same challenge exists for civil disobedience. If the stories are compelling, readers may engage with viewpoints they wouldn't normally seek out. If the stories aren't compelling, then even readers who agree with the message may lose interest. So, where do I stand on this project? I think civil disobedience represents something that is becoming increasingly common in modern comics. Rather than chasing the broadest possible audience, creators are building projects for specific communities and specific readers. Some people will love that approach, some people will reject it entirely. But it's difficult to deny that crowdfunding has created opportunities for projects that might never have existed otherwise. Wherever this anthology becomes a major success or not, it serves as an interesting case study for where independent comics may be heading in the future. And perhaps the most interesting question isn't whether comics should be political. Maybe the question is whether readers are still willing to engage with stories that challenge their own political assumptions. Because that's where the real discussion begins. Anyway, these are my thoughts, and I'll be following this campaign to see if it succeeds or not. But have you backed Civil Disobedience? Does this project remind you of films like One Battle After Another, judging by the Honey Badger pages? I don't think this has anything to do with it, but let's see. Are political comics something you actively seek out? Or are you tired of politics in entertainment altogether? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so we can follow this closely and we can find out what the destiny of this project is together. And as always, thank you for watching, keep reading indie comics, and I'll see you on the next one.